Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. I rise in reply to the Governor's address yesterday, and what a wonderfully inspirational address it was. Mr Deputy Speaker, I came away very enthused about the future of the state, and both enthused about the future and a wonderful celebration of all the things we had achieved in the first 2 years. And if this address that we enjoyed yesterday is as prophetic as the one we enjoyed almost 2 years ago, then we are in for a wonderful 2 years ahead of us, Mr Deputy Speaker. A wonderful 2 years indeed. It was very pleasing, Mr Deputy Speaker, to see a focus by the Governor on bushfires, which of course is dominating national headlines at the moment in both the response to the fires that we have had to endure across the country and also in ways we might mitigate the impact of those fires going forward. And a very important topic of discussion at the moment, and it was pleasing to see the Governor dedicate such time to it in his precious time to it in his address yesterday, Mr Speaker. I'd like to expand on that, Mr Deputy Speaker, and speak about the fires that have impacted the electorate of Narungga within the last couple of months and the impact it's had on both family and business at home at the bottom end of the Yorke Peninsula. Since the 20th of November, Mr Deputy Speaker, members may be aware that there have been fires on the Yorke Peninsula at Edithburgh and Yorktown, as well as Price, Maitland, Arthurton and Port Wakefield. Of course, the major one, which was dominating the news there for a little while, started on the 20th of November, the first one of the season, I suspect, or one of the first ones of the season, near Yorktown, and spread out across a 61-kilometre front and was described by local farmers as one of the most ferocious fires they had ever come across. More than 5,000 hectares were burned, along with 11 homes and a long list, an extensive list of farm machinery and infrastructure, livestock, horses and poultry. 33 people were injured, but thankfully no lives are lost, although it did get close to taking some lives, and we all saw the famous photo in the advertiser of the Uten trailer in a ditch completely burnt out. How the driver of that ute survived that incident, I will never know, but he did. Thankfully no lives were lost in the fires on the bottom end of the peninsula. Of course, none of us could know that these Yorktown and Edithburgh fires were sparked by an electrical fault, but they were, and neither could we know that these were only to be the start of a devastating bushfire season across our nation. It's burned almost 12 million hectares and killed an estimated billion native animals, destroyed more than 3,000 homes, and has tragically seen 33 people lose their lives across our wonderful nation. In South Australia, Mr Deputy Speaker, some 245,000 hectares have been burnt, and while the Yorke Peninsula fires on the 20th and 21st of November only burned 5,000 hectares, which make pale in comparison to the more than 210,000 hectares burned on KI or the 24,000 hectares burned at Cuddly Creek, as well as the fire in the southeast. No less severe has been the local impact of such fires of the property owners and residents and landholders in and around the townships of Edithburgh and Yorktown, who lost their homes and possessions, and in many cases their lives' work. For these people, Mr Deputy Speaker, the fear and devastation experienced is the same, and all are on the same road to recovering from what is a significant trauma felt by everyone, individuals and families and landowners who have lost much and continue today to recover with the assistance of a great many people. The Yorktown Local Recovery Centre remains open some 10 weeks since the fires started, and just as fierce as the fires were has been the power of the rallying communities of people digging in to help others and the enormous, amazing efforts to raise funds for various appeals. On the Southern Yorke Peninsula, pleasingly, $60,000 of donations raised locally directly for those impacted by the Yorktown fires has begun to be distributed, with applications for assistance closing today. I'd like to take this opportunity to commend Wendy Alt from Police Credit Union Yorktown for putting her hand up and getting organised this local recovery effort, and everyone else that's made a contribution to that fire fund, as well as those that have put their hand up for help in other ways. Well done, Wendy, for making a Police Credit Union bank account available for local donations. Fittingly, Mr Deputy Speaker, the job of assessing just what funds are allocated where from this local fundraising is in the capable hands of members of the local Bushfire Recovery Committee, headed by Local Recovery Centre Coordinator Deb Richardson. I commend the Yorktown Local Bushfire Recovery Committee on their considerable work in recent weeks, their role being to share information, recognise support and action groups and find solutions. The committee comprises community reps Peter Stockings, or Stocksy, Karen Warren, who has headed up the Blaze 8 effort, local farmer Ben Wondersits and Kay Barlow, local farmers I should say, Ben Wondersits and Kay Barlow, and York Peninsula Council reps Mayor Darren Braund, CEO Andrew Cameron, and Development Services Director Roger Brooks, with Max Barr from Northern York Natural Resources Management, Marty Collins from the Weavers Ag Bureau, and what a tremendous support he's been for local farmers throughout this whole ordeal, Mr Deputy Speaker. Mary Ann Young from PIRSA, Captain Karen Armstrong from the Salvation Army, plus SAPOL and Department of Health representatives. It has been pleasing, Mr Deputy Speaker, to sit in on their meetings on a couple of occasions and hear how well they're working together and how well they're serving their community in their recovery efforts. So I commend all involved on that committee, and may it continue to provide great recovery services to the people that have been affected by that fire. I can also advise, Mr Deputy Speaker, that the committee, the Local Recovery Committee, is hosting a community check-in on the 14th of February, which I am looking forward to attending at Yorktown. It will certainly be a valuable social gathering, as well as another opportunity to further assess the value of efforts so far and how the area and local people in it are recovering. So everyone that's been affected, I would encourage them to get to that local gathering. If they've got any concerns or issues that need further addressing, then please make them known of any nature at that event. The state government's Personal Hardships Grants program that opened the day after the fires on 21 November, offering emergency cash for adults and children forced to evacuate, I can advise has been closed, being replaced with the Recovery Payments programs. As of the 28th of January, 374 personal hardship grants, totalling over $175,000, had been issued for the Yorktown fire. I can tell members of this place that it was wonderfully well appreciated by the local people that that money was so readily available, so quickly available to them when they were needing it most. And it was pleasing to see that it was wheeled out without a great deal of bureaucracy, without a great deal of hindrance or paperwork, and it was very well appreciated, as I said, by those that needed it at that time. So I commend the government and the minister for making that money available at such short notice so quickly. As I said, I was pleased to see this assistance swiftly coordinated, along with a recovery hotline opened and a full recovery centre operational within 72 hours of the fire starting, with local recovery coordinator Deb Richardson appointed to coordinate all the efforts and assistance services. And they came from far and wide to help, Mr Deputy Speaker. People are just appearing to help feed the fireys, house them, offer clothing and emergency supplies for those who are forced to evacuate. Farm units rallied, as well as SA Police, SES and MFS, the ambulance, St John's Volunteers, the Salvation Army, SA Housing Authority staff, Red Cross, social clubs, sporting clubs, progress associations, local business. Everyone rallied to help, and it was wonderful to see, wonderful to be down there to see everyone rallying around a community in need at their most dire time. Soon, Mr Deputy Speaker, more federal disaster recovery payments were made available and income support, and a PIRSA hotline was up and running for animal and livestock issues. And, Mr Speaker, BlazeAid started arriving, and what a wonderful organisation and charity BlazeAid is. I have to admit, ashamedly, I was a little bit unaware of the work that BlazeAid did prior to this fire, but having seen them in action now, I can attest to the wonderful work that they do, and I can tell you, after having talked to many farmers that have needed their assistance, that their work is wonderfully appreciated. Fencing in the wake of a fire like that is a job that no one wants, and to have a team of volunteers there ready to lend a hand and do all the dirty work and help clean up the wire and clean up the fence post, and then to install new wire and new fence posts going forward is well appreciated. And I can tell you that one farmer that needed help was brought to tears by the generosity of those volunteers that have travelled from far and wide, set up their caravans in a little community being housed at the Light Church in Edithburgh and ready to help. I did a day with BlazeAid myself, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I got there more used to office jobs than hard work, as many in this place will know, and I thought they were having a lend to me when my first job was getting down to my guts with an empty tuna tin, fishing out loose gravel from the bottom of fence post holes, ready for the installation of the fence posts. So those were the deepest holes out of all of them at the end of the day, but spent the first half of the day fishing out loose gravel from the bottom of fence post holes. Didn't enjoy it a great deal, but it was pleasing to help out a farmer in need. We then got on to the job of actually installing the fence posts, which was far more rewarding as we could see the fence sort of being erected and coming together. And we did almost 3 kilometres worth of fencing, holes, wire, posts and all that day. It was really pleasing to join in with a team of, at that point, mostly local volunteers that had come from surrounding towns like Point Turton, Edithburgh and other towns like that, just to lend a hand. They were unaffected, but they appreciated that these farmers needed their help, and they came, as I said, from local communities to help out. So it was wonderful to join in with those people, and I'd also like to pay tribute to the farm home who miraculously dodged the fire. The fire had burnt all around it and singed the back door, but somehow they had managed to save the house. And the lady that lived here welcomed the whole Blaze Aid team that was on the fence line that day into her house and made us all burgers for lunch and wonderful homemade scones with homemade jam for dessert. And it was really a nice break from fishing loose gravel out of the bottom of fence post holes, Mr Deputy Speaker. So wonderful experience, and I came away really appreciative and really cognisant of the fact that, as I said, Blaze Aid does fantastic work and that it is really well appreciated by the farmers. So for any of the fires around the state, if anyone in this chamber feels particularly inclined to help, I would suggest that Blaze Aid is a particularly productive way in which they can do that. So if they're so inclined and willing to get their hands dirty, then that is a recommendation that I would readily make, and congratulations to everyone that has served so far in Blaze Aid around the state. Mr Deputy Speaker, so much has been said today about the bravery displayed by the CFS and its volunteers and the exhausting and amazing work of firefighters across the state this bushfire season. And to be frank, no praise is high enough for them. And the efforts of CFS and farmers who fought the fires on Yorke Peninsula in November were no different. On 20 November, you will recall half the state experienced catastrophic fire weather conditions, with the remaining rated as severe or extreme. On that day, the CFS responded to over 60 fires at Price on the YP, where 290 hectares burnt, Appler in the mid-north, Beaufort in the mid-north, Yorktown on the Yorke Peninsula, Finnis on the Fleurieu, and Angaston in the Barossa. A busy day for the CFS indeed. But by far the Yorktown fire, with its 61-kilometre perimeter, was the largest and most dangerous on that day, with over 47 appliances and 250 firefighters committed to it at its height. To give an indication of the scale of the effort, there were 53 CFS brigades which responded to the Yorktown fires, without whom the result would have been far worse, and they came from far and wide. And at nearby Port Wakefield, there were another 67 crews, 14 appliances, 3 water carriers, and 2 fixed-wing aerial bombers. Thank God for the fixed-wing aerial bombers, Mr Deputy Speaker. And at Price, of course, fighting a grass fire at the same time were another 100 firefighters, 18 trucks and 3 aircraft. The justified praise of local CFS for literally saving our towns has been loud throughout the weeks that we have all watched in horror, what occurred at the Adelaide Hills and on Kangaroo Island. And I want to touch on literally saving our towns, Mr Deputy Speaker, because upon visiting Edithburgh with the Premier and the Minister for Emergency Services, we were able to witness firsthand how close the fire got to the township of Edithburgh. There was a house on the edge of town which is adjoining what used to be a wonderfully bountiful wheat crop, and the entirety of that crop had been burnt out, with only burnt seed lying on the ground, and fences had been torched while still standing. They were clearly and obviously burnt and destroyed. And the fence, the Colorbond fence, which bordered the wheat crop and the house, was black on one side, Mr Deputy Speaker, but it remained its usual cream colour on the other side. That's how close it got. It literally burnt the side of the fence before it got to the house. And if that house had taken off, then who knows how it would have gone through the town after that. So those CFS volunteers and those firefighters literally saved the town there, I suspect, Mr Speaker. And as I said, there is no praise that is high enough for them. There are firefighters there battling to contain fires for 6 unrelenting weeks, all stretching to breaking point. And their efforts across the state have been staggering. As I stated in my speech to this House on the 26th of November, the CFS crews and farmers who literally risk life and limb to help others are genuine heroes. And no words can fully convey how grateful and inspired multiple communities across the YP are for their efforts on the southern part on the 20th of November. So amazing was their skills and dedication. I commend too the ongoing significant efforts of Livestock SA, which has been coordinating the donated fodder to KI from their makeshift camp at the Cape Jervis depot. My office has been inundated with inquiries about this effort, and I commend all local growers whom I am aware have directly assisted to fight fires on KI and help clean up and have donated hay to help their island neighbours. I had the solemn privilege, I suppose, Mr Deputy Speaker, of visiting KI recently. There's a number of Yorke Peninsula farmers, as I said, that went over to help with the clean-up effort, and one was courteous enough to call me and invite me over for the day, so I had the opportunity to witness the destruction and despair that had been wrought upon that island. I accepted the offer with the caveat that I did not want to get in the way of the clean-up effort. I was only going on over there if I could be of some use, so it was pleasing to get over there and help those YP farmers over there that were on the island doing something productive. While we were over there, we travelled around the entirety of the island, and it was just staggering, particularly in Flinders Chase, to see the destruction, as I said. You could stand in the middle of that national park and turn around 360 and not see anything alive for as far as you can see. It was really, really alarming, and at the same time, purely remarkable again to see how houses have been saved in the middle of fire ground. So it was a solemn privilege, as I said, to get over there and witness that, and I thank those farmers, some of whom have got land over there, for showing me around. And one lasting memory I will take away from that visit, of many lasting memories, is driving around and periodically seeing big piles of dirt that have been removed from the ground. After a couple, I asked what they might be, and I was informed that they were the dirt from the hole that the sheep had been buried in, that no longer could fit back in the hole due to the vast quantity of sheep. So just to see the size of those piles of dirt and the number of sheep that must have taken to displace it was just truly breathtaking and staggering. And that visit at KI was a real eye-opener for me. And it really and to speak to people that were there over there fighting the fire when it happened was really an important thing for me to do. I'm glad I went in the end, and I can please to report that I didn't get in the way and did learn a lot to improve processes to better prepare us for future emergencies and disasters. As the recovery continues and reviews of efforts formally commence, there will be much more to assess. And I'd like to raise a couple of issues that have been brought up with my office, which include ways in which we can improve going forward. Issues that have been raised by volunteers and farm fire units include communication procedures, CFS vehicle technology and tracking, fire breaks management, which is a big one that I took away from my visit at the Kangaroo Island, assistance for fodder donors, which I've pleasingly highlighted Livestock SA and PIRS's work on that, water access and water replacement for fighting fire, and ideas which I will pass on that have been brought to me about how to improve coordination of bushfire assistance grants and qualifying criteria. The independent review announced by the Premier on 28 January will be valuable and will rightly look into SA's preparedness for dealing with significant bushfire activity, and I encourage participation by everyone. Mr Deputy Speaker, I'd like to commend the tax and fee relief measures made available by the state government, as well as the assistance for volunteer firefighters who have put in time into volunteering in the current fire season and have incurred great personal financial costs. The Volunteer Firefighters Financial Support Program commenced on 23 January, offering eligible volunteer firefighters who are self-employed or employed by small, medium businesses payments of up to $300 per day, tax-free and not means tested. I was pleased too that in mid-January Yorke Peninsula Council was included as an eligible LGA area to receive grants of up to $75,000 for farmers and $10,000 for small businesses. This additional assistance, provided through the jointly funded Commonwealth State Disaster Recovery Funding Arrangements, will be most welcome to those in desperate need. It has been incredible to have so many volunteers and support people working so hard across the state and our country, undertaking a myriad of tasks from fire containment to wildlife and habitat assistance to driving fodder relief and fundraising, and all of these efforts are deserving of all the support government can provide. I will not forget, as the local SYP people impacted, the descriptions they relayed of watching their homes being engulfed in flames, of racing through blackness to the Edithburgh tidal pool for shelter, unable to even see the beach or find the boat ramp, to escape just in time with just the clothes on their back, to pack their cars with what they could stuff in them and congregate on the beach parking bays, to hear of the numbers of livestock killed, tractors engulfed in flames, of the collective community cheer that went up when the Boeing 737 dropped 15,000 litres of fire retardant to protect the Yorktown township. Locals are told of fire literally lapping at the doorsteps of the homes in Edithburgh, and the firefighters, ambulance crews and SAPOL, SES and council staff who assisted them, described as heroes who ensured no lives were lost. On behalf of the Narungga people, I'd like to take this opportunity, Mr Deputy Speaker, to pay tribute to all the efforts of so many special people. Mr Speaker, now that I've concluded that part of the proceeding, I'd like to touch on a couple of other things mentioned in the Governor's address, particularly the success that we've had as a government over the past 2 years, or coming up on 2 years. We've had tremendous, well past overdue success securing road funding for the electorate of Narungga, Mr Deputy Speaker, including $3.5 million for the entrance to Kadina from Moonta, a road that was notoriously bumpy without drainage there for a long period of time. And I know it's been a council priority for a long period of time. So to see that road being done up in what is quite a heavy business district is wonderfully pleasing, and pleasing for me, particularly after having taken the Minister there to demonstrate the need for it, that it was delivered so quickly thereafter. Even more pleasing, I suspect, for people that live anywhere south of the central part of Yorke Peninsula is an 8-kilometre stretch of the Maitland to Minlaton Road, which has been completely resealed. This road is notorious amongst locals and truck drivers who deliver grain to port as a particularly bad road, and is alleged by local people that right up there and amongst the worst roads in the state, Mr Deputy Speaker. Now, they may well be biased, who knows, but it's pleasing that 8 kilometres of that stretch of about 40 k's is done, so we are well on the way to fixing that problem, which has well and truly been ignored, at least for the prior 16 years. As well as that, there's been heavy maintenance done on the Highway 1, which is another bugbear of many local people that have to go to Adelaide back and forth regularly. I'd like to commend Federal Member Rowan Ramsey for his advocacy in ensuring that that part of the road is updated and safe, made more safe. Also, Mr Speaker, there has been wonderful work done for those that deliver both grain to Port Giles, with improvements to the road there to make their truck trip safer, and stock to the Dublin sale yards, which is the beneficiary of an $11 million investment to make access easier for trucks with large stock loads there. So both of those will make it easier for our primary producer to get their product to port. I commend the government and the Minister for his excellent work in delivering that. Also, Mr Speaker, one of the priorities of the local population in Narungga has been healthcare for some time, and after the disaster of transforming health, it is pleasing to see real inroads being made into the service of provision of health in the electorate of Narungga. It gives me great pleasure to report that the work on the surgical theatre at the Yorktown Hospital has commenced, or will commence in the immediate future. This will be a wonderful, wonderful addition to a hospital that does a great job of servicing a population that's largely retired people who need access to these sort of provisions more often, who like to have it locally, don't like to travel the 3.5 hours to Adelaide. And it's pleasing that this Health Minister sees fit to provide those services locally instead of just shuttering hospitals all over the country and making people drive to Adelaide. So wonderful for the Yorktown people, wonderful for the SYP people, and we will keep going and delivering better health services for our regional communities. We're also pleased to report that $2.6 million was spent to upgrade the Lumia homes in Snowtown, which was left to rack and ruin, and now has been upgraded to meet safety standards which it previously didn't meet. So wonderful investment there. And finally, in terms of hospitals, I would like to take this opportunity to commend the Minister. Community-owned hospitals are a difficult proposition for a health budget, which is already an extensive part of the overall budget. But Minister in the other place, Stephen Wade, was able to find over $700,000 for the Ardrossan Hospital Accident Emergency Services, which is really well appreciated by the local community board that run that hospital. We're having a hard time making ends meet when uninsured patients presented. You can't turn them away, you have to treat them, and this money will ensure that they can continue to do that. So it's been a wonderful period in our electorate after so many years securing road funding, which we've been waiting for, securing health funding, which we've been waiting for, and I'd like to commend this government and the ministers for the work they've done in securing that. If I could just touch on one or two more things in my brief time remaining, Mr Deputy Speaker. There has been a wonderful announcement recently, and it's subject to an upcoming motion of investment by this government in our wonderful coastline around this state. And the electorate in Narungga has been a wonderful beneficiary of that grant program as well, with considerable monies being allocated to flood protection works at Port Clinton. And on high tide, that township is subject to extreme flooding, and we should be able to prevent that and keep homes, the bottom floors of homes, safe going into the future, as well as well over $50,000 to address sand drift and sand retention issues at North Beach, which is the bugbear of people that live on the beachfront there, who constantly have to empty out their porches and front verandas, as well as almost $40,000 for Barunga West Council for their design protection works at Port Broughton as well. So wonderful, Mr Speaker, that we've got improvements in road infrastructure in Narungga. We've got improvements in health, finally, in Narungga, and there's work being done on our coastlines as well. And I just want to conclude, Mr Deputy Speaker, by saying To the people of Narangba, I remain committed to highlighting to as many people as I can and as often as possible that regional South Australia is home to less than 30% of the state's population, yet contributes some $26 billion to the state's economy. And a big part of that is the thriving agricultural industry, and policy and investment must reflect the vital importance of farmers and the primary production sector to the economies of our nation and state. This year I look particularly forward to the continued work being done by the Marshall Liberal government on the state's first regional development strategy, the new grains industry blueprint, in recognition that our state's 4,500 grain farmers last year contributed an estimated $4.2 billion to our state's economy. And now the new beef and sheep industry blueprints, supported by $7.5 million for the red meat and wool industry growth program, in recognition that our red meat and wool industry is South Australia's largest manufacturing employer, supporting 30,000 jobs. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, I really was inspired by the Governor's address yesterday. I look forward to the forthcoming success that it hopefully brings. I thought it very pleasing that the Governor touched on the wonderful successes of the government over the past 2 years, noting, of course, that we're almost at the halfway point of this government's first term. I thought it was wonderfully exciting, the vision that he outlined for the future of this state going forward. So, Mr Speaker, I'm looking forward to being part of the government and continuing to work cohesively with the ministers to ensure that Narangba gets its fair share going forward. We certainly have enjoyed a greater share of the benefits than we have previously, particularly note the previous 16 years in which the share we received was an abysmal reflection on the government's priorities and city-centric thought processes. So, Mr Speaker, it now being exceedingly close to lunchtime, I will conclude my remarks.
Member for Finnis.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker.